Hello, everyone. Hi, all the Zoom people. We keep adding Zoom people, which
I
is kind of
know.
cool.
Yeah.
So
Is your mother-in-law there?
yeah,
She
that's the
took off
back
for
of
a
that
minute.
chair is her chair.
Where's she? The chair.
I don't know, but her life alert is attached to my phone, so.
She's okay.
So, welcome back to, we're at week 3 of David. We're gonna get into a little more traditional Bible study in that we're actually going to be more immersing ourselves more in just a section of scripture instead of covering like 10 years of David's life. We're not leaving the blood behind and the deaths behind. We're gonna get blood and deaths. We're also gonna get a little more reflective today in that the story that we're talking about, which is David and Bathsheba, is the great story of sin and repentance. So we are gonna move from history and politics to more a looking at David's faith and a looking at our faith and how David becomes a metaphor for our own spiritual lives, his own experience of sin, and then his own experience of repentance. So let's start with a prayer, and then we're going to dive in. Lord, put your spirit in us and on us. Be with our neighbors in East Palestine. Be with us as a little bit of that chaos hits our town today. But give us space now to just delve into your word and link those ancient stories with our story. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
So we're going to do today David and Bathsheba, but I want to start with a different story. This is an earlier story in David's life. This is a story from when he is in the desert running away from Saul. And it's the story of David and Abigail. And the reason that I want to start with this story is because in many ways, it's a parallel to the David and Bathsheba story. In other ways, it's not, but in many ways, it is. Oh, and I want to just put right up in front, you'll notice as I go through this that I refer to the action of David to Bathsheba, and I will refer to it as rape. That's not a churchy word. It's not one that's in the biblical, in the Bible study material, certainly not the ones that we give to our kids. But if you look at this story, there is no such thing as consent in this story anywhere.
Well, it is what it is.
It is what it is. So I have, for many years now, after that clicked, I've just been very steadfast in that language. So we're gonna, because I'm the teacher, we're gonna keep the language and we're not gonna try to paper over it is what it is. So David has left Saul's court. He's gathered his little band of merry men in the desert, and they're hungry. They're literally living in caves. And there's very convenient, and they are, if you get your map, they're in an area called Carmel. Nobody knows where Carmel is. Carmel is not on your map, but, and this is important, if you look on your map where Hebron is, Carmel is around Hebron. Hebron becomes David's capital in Judea. So they're wandering around down in this desert area, being chased by Saul. So there was a man whose property was in Carmel, and I'm reading here from 1 Samuel 25. And I'm on page 1 of your handout. There was a man whose property was in Carmel. The man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. So he's probably richer than Saul, or as rich as Saul. We're in kingly riches territory. He was shearing sheep in Carmel. Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife was Abigail. The woman was clever and beautiful, but the man was surly and mean. He was a Calebite, which we don't really know what that means. So David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young man, "Go up to Carmel and go to Nabal and greet him in my name. And you shall say to him, peace be to you, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have. I hear that you have shearers. Now your shepherds have been with us, and we did them no harm, and they missed nothing all the time they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, let my young men find favor in your sight, for we have come on a feast day. Please give whatever you have at hand to your servants and to your son David." So what's going on here?
He's asking for payment for having been good to them.
Right. I didn't harass your shearers. Now pay for my generosity toward your shearers. So this is, what's a word we use for this? It's a shakedown.
Okay.
Because what's implied?
Is it threat?
If you don't pay for the safety I've given to your shearers, then they won't be safe anymore.
Okay.
Nabal, who is surly and mean, refuses David's demands. In response, David gets all of his men together, and he goes to visit Nabal, armed. And he prepares to take what Nabal won't give. When Abigail hears how her husband had responded to David, she loads up wagons of provisions and she intercepts David's raiding party. So she puts together the payoff that her husband refused to pay off. And she presents the gifts to David, saying this. This is a great little 2 sentences here. He says, "Please forgive the trespasses of your servant, for the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, and evil shall not be found in you so long as you live." So what's this? We ran into this a few times last week. What is this recognizing? Who has authority?
This is powerful for a woman.
Oh, this is very
Yeah.
powerful. Abigail is in many ways a very powerful woman.
Where did she come from? But
We don't know.
just a random woman.
I mean, she's the wife of the richest man in
Yeah.
town.
Yeah.
But you don't know her background then.
No, we don't, no, she just,
Of
she
course.
Would he have
shows
paid for her?
possibly,
Yeah.
or from another powerful family to make.
Yeah.
I'm sure this was not a love match.
No,
Like, yeah.
Right.
I
No.
understand.
But in this, so the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord. David is living in a cave
Yeah.
with all the misfits and the, so what's she affirming? What's this another affirmation in the text of? Who is the right person?
David,
David.
right.
So then Abigail goes home. We find that Nabal is having a great feast. This is a feast that is described as fit for a king, a royal feast. Nabal gets drunk. Later, Abigail tells her husband what he did, what she did, and then Nabal dies. Bloop.
very conveniently.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
what does David do?
He takes
He
takes
takes-
Abigail.
He gets her.
He takes Abigail,
Thanks, Sarah.
doesn't woo her, doesn't
No.
anything. He takes her. Now Abigail has more agency than we'll see Bathsheba have, but still, his response is, she's available now.
Well, that was
Yeah.
fast.
That was fast. This is very convenient. I mean, we could launch a whole TV show, Who Killed Nabal?
Yeah.
But again, David's in the other room, right? David's always in the other room when someone conveniently dies. David's in the other room. We're told that God killed Nabal.
Yes.
He was a drunken louse. Abigail might have offed him. Maybe he just got drunk and fell down the stairs.
Yeah, well, it
Um,
says his heart died
his-
and he came like stone, but he actually didn't die 10 days later.
I know.
That sounds Weird.
Yeah.
That's
So-
weird.
I just wanna, so I want this as a prequel because we really see here David. Well, what does David get? What does David get?
Abigail.
What else does he get?
What did he-
Riches.
Riches.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
he gets Nabal's wife. He also gets all of Nabal's sheep. He also gets all of Nabal's goats. He gets all of Nabal's land. He,
Nobody would question that, were there no others there? She had no children that would,
we don't know of any children. David has 400 men with swords.
yes, that's what it was.
So it was
There you
He
bigger.
just took that.
And this is the exact same place that when after Saul dies, that David uses as his base to assert his kingship
Near Hebron.
near Hebron.
Okay.
And we already see that Nabal is basically the closest thing there is to a king. Judah did not have a king. Saul was not king of Judah. So here we have this guy, Nabal, who I'm sure David knew because David's family was a big family in Judah too. There weren't that many people around. And David is able to take what he wants, what he needs from Nabal and use that to forward his ambition and his aims. Just hold this story and we're going to jump to Bathsheba because this is a prequel to Bathsheba. They work together. So who was Bathsheba? Somebody give me their sense of Bathsheba.
The wife of a army
Right.
general.
So wife of an army general.
She was very beautiful.
She was very beautiful,
Was she young? Was she
probably.
Younger than,
Um, If you look at art of Bathsheba, she has problems keeping her clothes on. This painting that's here
Yeah.
is one of the few paintings, classic European paintings of Bathsheba with her clothes on.
geez, yeah.
Huh, is that in scripture? That she goes around.
But remember the story, one of the things, this is a little bit of a digression, but one of the things that happens with strong female characters in the Bible is they get sexualized. So, and one of the ways we've let David off the hook in this story over the years is by putting emphasis on Bathsheba's beauty, on Bathsheba's being in the bath, on her nakedness in the bath, so that Bathsheba becomes a seductress. But isn't this what we do? We shift. You're all, everybody but Rick and I are women in this room. So we shift the blame from the man to the woman. It becomes Bathsheba's fault for being young and beautiful and taking a bath.
Well, shame on her.
Yeah.
She was asking,
fault,
she was asking for it.
But but don't we do the same thing now?
We do.
We're like, look at how she was dressed, you know?
A lot
um,
of that.
So,
Okay,
so who is Bathsheba? She was the wife of Uriah, one of the 37 mighty men who led David's army. So David's mighty men were the heart of his fighting force, like his own personal group who have been with him in some cases since he was in the desert, chasing around, being chased by Saul. She is the daughter of Elam, who is another one of David's mighty men. And she is the granddaughter of Ahithophel, who is David's senior advisor. Is she a stranger?
No.
I don't think so.
No,
And she would be young.
she would be young. David was likely at her wedding. Now we're tracking the bloodshed, so her husband, Uriah, we'll see in the story, you already know this, so he's killed by David's order. Elam, as far as we know, lived to be a happily old age. Her grandfather takes the wrong side in a battle between David and David's son Absalom, which we're going to get to in a couple weeks. He commits suicide. So keep in your mind what is the real sense of relationship between these two households by the time everything is said and done.
Very close.
Well,
They're all
but
related or.
but also. David, or this proximity to David, costs the family. It costs Bathsheba.
yeah.
She loses her husband. She loses her grandfather. Her father just disappeared. He's a footnote in the narrative. We know nothing about him, other than he was Bathsheba's father. That's all we know. So, Bathsheba is the mother of Solomon. We're gonna talk more about Solomon in the last one in that battle for succession. But she is the mother of Solomon. Her firstborn from David, we don't know if there's any kids from Uriah. That we don't know. Her firstborn, who's conceived during the rape, dies. And we'll get to that in the story, but he dies as punishment for the rape. So now here's another loss that's proximity to power. And then just 3 other sons. We know nothing about them. One of the very interesting Bible things about Bathsheba is that Samuel, 2 Samuel, gives one accounting of her kids, and Chronicles gives a totally different accounting of her kids. So in 2 Samuel, she has 2 kids with David, the child that died, and then Solomon. In Chronicles, Solomon is the youngest of 4. And she has 3 kids with David before she has Solomon. They don't agree.
Okay.
Don't try to figure out why. So they just don't agree. So that's who Bathsheba is. So what, before we go directly into the scripture, what's your sense of this woman?
Very loose,
Loose?
very loose.
See,
Why
I've
would
never
you
had
say
that.
that?
Thought, from what we've said
Yeah.
today, I get that impression that maybe she was seductive, but I never thought that before. I thought he had seen her and took her and raped
Well-
her, and then in
She
order
was
to
supposed
cover
to be
up,
beautiful.
all these other manipulations occurred.
Mhm.
Well, prominent men were, her husband was very prominent, was the leader of the mighty men, and her father also was a mighty man, so.
Right, I mean, she was definitely she was a military brat.
There you go.
That actually comes to play later. That's how Solomon ends up with the kingship, that the army supports him. And you could see why the army would support him.
You know,
Because,
why would she take a bath naked where people could watch her?
well, remember too, Jerusalem at this time is the size of 8 football fields. People were living on top of each other. People didn't have big grand palaces with lots of rooms. I mean, David probably took one of those football fields for himself. That only left 7 football fields for everybody else. They're living on top of each other. They're living on their roofs. Their life those days was much more public than life is now. You know, we might have in the area the size of 8 football fields in Columbiana, that's gonna give you 8 houses maybe. Not 1,000 people, 2,000 people. They're living on top of each other. That's how old ancient cities worked. Okay, let's get into the story. Part 1. In the spring of the year, the time when, I'm on page 3, by the way, for the handout. The time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab with his officers and all of Israel with him, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained at Jerusalem. So the army's out fighting, but David decides to stay home. It happened late one afternoon when David rose from his couch and was walking about on the roof of his house, that he saw from his roof a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. David sent someone to inquire about the woman. It was reported, "This is Bathsheba's daughter of Elam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite." So David sent messengers to get her. She came to him. He lay with her. Now she was in the bath purifying herself after her period. Then she returned to her house. The woman conceived, and she sent and told David, "I am pregnant." So this is the act, the key story. Who is the one who's taking all the action in this story? Who's the main actor? David, right? He looks, he inquires, although as we've talked about, that seems to be something that he wouldn't really need to do. He inquires, he then sends, and then he takes. Why does David do this?
He's a man.
He's a man.
Well, not all men are like that.
No.
There you go.
And what kind of man is he?
Possessive.
Possessive, but who is he?
The anointed king.
The anointed king. So, there's a concept, it's applicable here. It actually, the articulation comes from the Middle Ages, but it goes back much further. And it's called the divine right of kings. And that's an official thing. It's actually a policy, a thing written up by the Vatican back a long time ago. But it's based on this sense of a strong link between God or the gods, if you're in pre-Jewish culture, and the ruler. So Pharaoh in Egypt was a god. He was also king, but he was a god. In Rome, Roman money said Caesar is Lord. Caesar was a god. He had temples built to him. People offered sacrifices to Caesar. They prayed to Caesar. This is ambiguous territory between a god and a person. If you are a god, who do you answer to?
Nobody.
Nobody.
You're the one. You're it.
Yeah.
And I mean, we talk about this with God. What belongs to God? What do we talk about belonging to God? Everything. So if you're a guy who is king in an environment and in a culture where kingship and godship go together, what belongs to you in your kingdom?
Everything, and you can take it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Nora.
Check in.
Are you okay, Nora?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Can you get home?
I think so.
You sure?
No.
Now, kings felt this way. How about presidents and governors?
I think it can go to their head.
I think so
Uh,
too. There's been,
Now, David never ever claims to be a god. But we'll give him that. He never ever claims to be a god. But he does claim to be God's anointed, the one who is directly given power by God. So David is only answerable to God. That comes to play later in the story as well. And I put for you in a handout. This is a quote, an actual quote from King James the First of England, who was the guy who did the King James Bible. And he actually said that God himself calls kings gods. So this was his self-image of himself. And by the way, he scripture footnoted it to Romans chapter 13. It's a very creative reading of Romans chapter 13. And this is another footnote before we go on, but if you really want to be a total Bible geek, get a copy of the King James Bible
I have,
and get a copy of any modern translation and read Romans 13 side by side. And you will notice that King James maybe had a little bit of influence over how it was worded. So
Romans 13.
yeah, it's subtle. It's very subtle, but it's there. And at the very beginning of this story, Samuel, remember the prophet Samuel? He gives the Israelites a warning about what would happen if they got a king.
That's right.
His warning goes something like this. This will be the ways of a king ruling over you. They will take your sons, he will take your daughters, he will take the best of your fields, he will take 1/10 of your grain, he will take your male and female slaves, he will take your flocks, he will make you his slaves. What's that active for English majors here? The active verb in this
Take.
whole list. Take. So Samuel is warning the Israelites what a king will do. A king will take. So what do we see David doing in this story?
Exactly what Samuel said.
Right. David is taking. So put yourself in David's shoes now. On a scale of 1 to 10, how normal, abnormal is this behavior? Someone from online, how abnormal, normal is this behavior for David? Right.
He would think that
This
He
is
was
another day.
entitled.
Another day. It's good to be king. See a beautiful woman? Know that her husband's not there because he's in the army off fighting. You got people, you send for her. It's another day.
Things haven't changed that much, have they?
But
Hey,
then,
Fritz.
yeah,
But I mean, as we go on, I don't want to mess up the story, but David knew he messed up.
I'm not sure he does yet.
Oh, okay, that's right. Because, well, we didn't know she was going to get pregnant, obviously. But then when she does, then he knows he got messed up or he did something wrong.
Maybe he did something inconvenient.
Yeah, man.
King's sons are complicated things. Um. I'm. Go on and y'all can decide how much guilt and remorse. When guilt and remorse comes into play.
Maybe when the baby dies.
Maybe,
Well,
maybe,
Mhm.
or maybe when Nathan shows up. And restructures this whole story. So yes, Rick. We ended the story with Bathsheba dropping the news that she is now carrying one more potential heir to the throne. So David responds by sending word to his loyal general to send Bathsheba's husband home and trying to get his loyal soldier to go and sleep with his wife. And Uriah doesn't. Uriah says, I didn't print all of this out, but Uriah says basically that he wasn't gonna go sleep with his wife while his comrades in arms were out fighting in the field. So he doesn't go home, he goes to the barracks and sleeps in the barracks like a good soldier. So now we have this contrast, right? Between David and Uriah. Who is looking better? Who's looking worse in the story?
Well, David's not looking no good.
No, it's
No.
not.
Right, so David is now trying to get Uriah to be one of his mighty men, to be a disloyal soldier.
And he gets him drunk.
He gets him drunk, that doesn't work. Uriah as a mighty man can probably hold his liquor pretty good. So David realizes that Uriah is not going to go sleep with his wife. So in the morning, David sends a letter to Joab. Joab is not only David's general, he's also the son of David's sister.
Okay.
It's East Palestine. Everybody is related. And who do you keep the closest? Who do you engage to be your most loyal people? It's family. And Joab has never, ever refused an order of
Oh.
David's. So he writes this letter. He gives it to Uriah to take to Joab. And the letter basically says, make sure Uriah dies on the battlefield. And Joab, the loyal general, the loyal soldier, does that. He kills, David's orders, he kills one of his top 30-some soldiers. It's like a general killing off one of the Green Berets or something like that. I mean, or one of your commanders. So Uriah is dead on the battlefield. Uriah is dead on the battlefield. Messenger comes back, tells David that Uriah is dead on the battlefield. David's response to Joab is, you did a great job. Don't let this misdeed trouble you. And then what does David do? What does David do? Once Uriah is out of the way, what does he do?
He lets Bathsheba mourn, and then as soon as she's done mourning, he takes her as a wife.
Right. Now, let's give David about this much credit in that at this point, all he can do is take Bathsheba as a wife.
Mhm.
Whether he wants Bathsheba as a wife or not, at this point, all he can do is take her as his wife. Add her to the harem. She is wife number 8, by the way.
8.
8.
8, wow.
Yeah, they stopped counting after her. So let's go back to that question. How normal, abnormal is David's behavior at this point for a king?
I'd say abnormal.
I think it's normal.
That at that time, I guess it would be. It's hard to think that way.
Yeah.
She,
You know?
she
Yeah,
is
very.
property.
Right. I mean, we're slipping toward the abnormal. We're getting toward more difficult territory. I mean, it is one thing to borrow another man's wife while he's away. It's another thing to kill the
To have
man
it killed.
to cover up your borrowing of his wife. But we're still in that realm of what kings can do.
It's a slippery slope.
It's a very
It sure
slippery
is.
slope. You know, I forget which of the many kings of England, I think it was, but I mean, one of them very publicly kept the wife of one of his nobles as his mistress for decades. He did not kill her husband, but he did pay him off considerably, land, estates, whatever, so that he could have his wife. It's good to be king.
Well, it is.
It's good
I
to be
wouldn't want to
king.
be married to a king. It wouldn't be true to me.
No. So,
And the current king of England has a consort.
right, but he is at least
Yeah.
married to her.
Who knows what
Yeah.
goes on?
Yeah.
Who knows?
That makes one heck of a tabloid type of thing that we've moved far beyond that, but I don't want to get into that. But
Well, and the English monarchy is England as a country kept their monarchy, but they rejected the divine right of kings.
yeah,
So they restructured that the monarch is actually in many ways responsible to Parliament in the English system. In part because they got tired of godlike kings doing whatever the heck they want. Especially the whole stealing women, stealing land, stealing money thing.
But they still manage to
Oh, yeah.
manipulate that.
Right.
Well, and even in our culture with class differences, wealth differences, etc., they manipulate.
Right.
Well, now I wonder if the Lord gives extra possibilities to a king. I mean, does the Lord say, okay, well, you're a king, you can have other women?
Kings would say so.
But you know,
Yeah.
you don't think that God is for that. I mean, God is a wonderful God.
Well, it's David's relationship with the Lord that saves him through all of this mess.
Right, and
That's the only thing, positive thing he has going for him.
right. And to get back to what you said, there's theologically with kingship, there is supposed to be a covenant relationship going on, so that God gives all this power to the king, and the king is God's representative to the people. In return, the king is supposed to care for the people and work for the people's well-being and invest in their community, in their country, and protect the borders and take care of everybody. It's a paternal thing. I mean, if you go back and read what James the First says, he talks about God makes the king the father of everybody.
Okay.
But a lot of kings, I would suggest the majority of kings, take the divine right and ignore the divine responsibility.
The power goes to their head.
Right, so David's job here is to protect Bathsheba because he is the divinely anointed king. But that is not what he does. He takes her, which is different from protecting her. His job is to protect his soldiers. So, David has done the deed. David has tried to cover up the deed. Enter the prophet Nathan.
Okay.
The prophet Nathan is a unique figure only in the David stories. We know almost nothing about Nathan, except that Nathan shows up 3 times in the story. Nathan shows up first to tell David, after David conquers Jerusalem, that's not David's job to build the temple. It will be his son's job to build the temple. That's the first appearance of Nathan. Second appearance of Nathan is in this story, where he calls David to account for his rape of Bathsheba. The third appearance of Nathan is engineering Solomon's ascension to the throne. That Nathan and Bathsheba work together to put the kingship into Solomon's hands instead of into the hands of Solomon's older brother, who's the rightful heir to the throne. So Nathan is a very interesting character here in that he only shows up in the story at times when it's advantageous to Solomon. The first is putting the temple in Solomon's hands. The second is essentially Solomon's origin story, how Bathsheba shows up and how Solomon's family becomes the royal family. And then the third is colluding with Bathsheba to make sure that her son comes out on top. And
Fritz,
yes,
Fritz, and Nathan's a prophet, right?
correct.
So he's got some credibility or something like that going on here, right?
Yeah, he's like a court advisor, a
Okay.
court prophet. That's kind of the best guess. He's part of the royal machinery. David's spiritual advisor, maybe David's pastor, someone who has access, but maybe is linked to Bathsheba, maybe by family, maybe by just sympathy. We don't really know. He just drops in.
Okay. Yeah, he's not like a judge or anything like that we had previously to this thing.
No. He just drops in.
Okay.
3 times.
Okay.
There's no reason to think he's not real, but literarily, if Elizabeth was sitting here and talking about this as story, Nathan drops in to move the story along as a character. He's the one, he drops in at certain major times in David's life or Solomon's life to push the story around the next bend. So Nathan comes to David and tells his own story. He's presenting a case to the king for wisdom and judgment. And it's this case about 2 men in a certain city. One is rich and the other is poor. The rich man had many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little lamb that he had bought. And he brought that lamb up, and it grew up with him and with his children, and he used to eat. It ate from the meager food that the household had, and it drank from the man's own cup, and it would lie at the man's bosom and was like a daughter to him. Now there came a traveler to the rich man, and the rich man was loath to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare a dinner for the traveler who had come to him. So he took the poor man's one lamb and prepared that for the guest who had come. Now let's break this little story apart. It's not rocket science here. Who is the rich man?
David.
Who are all of his flocks and sheep and goats and whatever?
The army.
No.
No.
What's David have plenty of?
Money.
What else?
Power.
What else?
Women.
Yes. David has tons of women.
But he wants one more.
He has 7 wives. He has whatever concubines are back in the harem. Who is the poor man? Uriah. And who gets reduced to the role of sheep? Bathsheba. So what in this story is Nathan accusing David of doing? We've been talking about it. Stealing the poor man's sheep when he didn't even need it.
Mm-hmm.
The rich man could easily have fed the traveler with one of his own flock, but he was too greedy. So he took it from the poor man.
Okay.
So David, whose job includes judging, and assumes this is a case that Nathan is asking him to judge, which in a way it is, accuses the rich man of the crime of stealing the poor man's land. And he delivers the death penalty to the rich man for stealing the poor man's land.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nathan has that very famous line, "You are the man." Now, why doesn't Nathan just walk in and tell David that he just screwed up royally? What might happen to Nathan if he did that?
He could be
He
killed.
might be killed
Probably
too.
be killed.
Right, on the way home,
Yeah.
you know,
Another convenient death.
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
convenient death. Well, I mean, this is not, David is not a person who you get on the bad side of.
Guess what?
Then God says, I made you king. Well, Nathan speaking for God. I made you king. I rescued you from Saul. I gave you Saul's house. I gave you, remember last time we talked about Saul's one wife, where she ends up? I gave you Saul's wives. I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if that hadn't been enough, I would have given you even more. Yet you have despised the word of God, done what was evil. You have struck down Uriah the Hittite and have taken his wife to be your wife, and you've killed him with your enemy's swords. Then there's the consequence. Now, therefore, the sword shall never depart from your house, for you have despised me and taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. And then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said, now the Lord has put away your sin, you shall not die. Nevertheless, because by this deed you have utterly scorned the Lord, the child born to you shall die. Then Nathan went to his house. So let's back up a little bit. If you go back to page 5 on your handout, under the story part 3, if you go to that third paragraph, and the last sentence of the third paragraph, it defines David's sin. And this is just kind of an interesting little thing that just popped out at me. So it says there, you have struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and have taken his wife to be your wife. So what's listed here and what isn't listed here? From our sensibilities. What are David's sins? 2 sins are listed here. What are David's sins? 2 sins.
Rape and murder.
Yeah, right.
Rape isn't listed.
No, the
Just
killing
as
is.
The killing is,
Taken.
the taking
Oh, the
of the
taken.
wife is,
Okay,
but the rape is
Like
not
stealing.
explicitly,
Yeah,
mentioned.
it isn't.
it could be implied, included in the second, but it's not really, because David has no intention of making, I mean, this is an hour on a slow day. Maybe not even that, I mean, so that's just culturally interesting.
okay.
Whereas we circle in on the rape
The rape.
Right.
in our 21st century mindset. The biblical chroniclers are circling in on Uriah
Mhm.
and the injustice done to Uriah, not the injustice done to Bathsheba. Uriah is killed and Uriah has had his property stolen. Even the parable, the injustice is to Uriah,
Mhm.
not to Bathsheba.
Okay,
And what are the consequences of David's sin? As we think about sin, this is important. What are the consequences of David's sin?
the death of the child.
The death of the child. What else? What does Nathan say bottom of page 5? What does Nathan tell David?
Oh, the sword shall never depart from your house.
The sword shall never depart from your house.
So what does that really mean?
What happens? This is for the Zoom people. I'm gonna let them answer this. What happens to our households when we mess up? What
It's usually
happens?
destroyed.
Right, there's ramifications, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if the husband goes out and has an affair, even if, or the wife goes out and has it, will be equal opportunity. Even if they go to marriage counseling, they pack it up and say everything's forgiven and we're gonna stay married, we're not gonna get a divorce. In your own families, I mean, I'm not saying any of you have gone out and had an affair, but you have friends, you have relatives, you have extended families. What happens? Does that just go away?
I don't think it ever
No,
goes.
I don't think so.
They rebel.
It runs through everything, right? It runs through your relationship, the relationship between the spouses. It runs through the kids. Sin snowballs and has consequences. That's how it works. And
Hey,
we,
Fritz.
yes,
I got a verse here from 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 11. And this is Nathan talking to David. Because of what you have done, I guess it's Nathan. Because of what you have done, I, the Lord, will cause your household to rebel against you. I will give your wives to another man, and he will go to bed with them in public view. Ooh. You did it secretly, but I will do this to you openly in the sight of all Israel. And then it says 13. Then that's when David confesses to Nathan, I've sinned against the Lord.
right. I was abbreviating, trying to keep the page count down, but
Okay.
Rick, you're absolutely right. And this story, so literarily, that would be called foreshadowing.
Mhm.
This story marks a major turning point, really a climax in the narrative. That we go from David, the confident and successful king, to David, the beleaguered and struggling king. And interestingly enough, this act also, remember very beginning, I said that there's a link in this story between virility and kingship and power. This is the last time we see a sexual strong David. So this is, and afterwards, those of you who read the whole thing, now we go right into trouble in David's household. One of David's sons rapes one of David's daughters. Where did that son get the idea? The brother of the full brother of the daughter who's raped, Absalom kills his half brother for the rape. Then Absalom goes into exile and comes back from exile, and the first thing he does when he comes back from exile is he tries to take the kingship from his father. Part of taking the kingship is doing what Rick just read. So in full view of all of Jerusalem, Absalom enters the harem and takes his father's wives. Now David gets the kingdom back, but what must he do, or his people do, to get the kingdom back? Who has to die? I'm getting ahead of ourselves, but I just want you to
Yeah.
see how this works. So David has to kill his own son to get his kingdom back.
Mhm.
And then when David dies, things are so unsettled in his kingdom that his two sons fight for the kingdom.
Right.
So nice, happy David family.
This is the end of it.
This is the end of it, if it ever was. But this narratively, this is the end of
Okay.
nice, happy David family. And it's implied in the narrative that Solomon gets the throne as recompense for David's sin.
Okay.
So basically, Bathsheba, who's pretty much lost anything to David, everything to David, finally gets her comeuppance because her son gets on the throne.
Yeah.
Son number 8 gets on the throne. Son number 8 isn't supposed to get, heir number 8 or 9, lost count, but
Yeah,
um,
wow.
In a way, it's like Charles and Diana. And Diana's passed, but the sons don't get along with the second wife.
right,
Yeah.
but haven't we, forget royalty. I mean, again, look at your own family.
Yeah.
Look at your neighbors' families, look at, I mean, I've done funerals where you have the children of one wife facing off against the children of another wife, and then together they're facing off against the third wife. I mean, that is the dysfunction. I mean, even all of your own kids get along. And I know as a parent, do you ever, I mean, there's times when we like joke, well, this is gonna add to the therapy bill. No, or you see your own dysfunction showing up in your child. I mean, this is family, for better or worse. I think it's one of the reasons David's story remains so relevant is that even though it's a story about a king, it's a very human story about trying to muddle your way through life and the effects parents have on their children. And so I just want to throw out one big question for you all to think about as we begin to wrap up. And I want to talk about this for maybe about 5 minutes or so, and then we're going to break up. What does this whole story we've just read teach us about how we sin? What does this story teach us about our own sin?
There are always consequences.
There are always consequences. Do we always plan out our sin in great detail?
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think we
No. I mean, does David plan this all?
No.
No,
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 he looks and he sees something that he can take
and he takes it,
and he takes it.
and. But that's an emotional response to a situation. An immediate thing, not a planned.
Right, and think about in your own lives how often that happens. I mean, not that you're like taking other people's wives or husbands or something, but just that the situation presents itself.
And then the other thing is to think about is the cover up.
Mhm.
Right, but I don't wanna go there quite yet. I mean, think about those moments in your marriages where it's a rough moment in your marriage and there's an opening to just really hurt your partner. And some days, even though we know better and we shouldn't, we take that opening sometimes. I mean, we hurt the people we love sometimes. It's a lot of sin, not all sin. Some sin is very calculated. We get to that. But a lot of sin is just, we stumble into it. It's a sin of opportunity. What is God's response to our sin?
We
I'm
certainly
sure.
wouldn't be happy.
No,
Not
I'm sure it
happy.
makes them sad.
It would be sad.
And if the person repents, the Lord forgives them, but sometimes the damage is done.
Right.
Right, well, and David's confession is very interesting here. David says to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. He doesn't say I've sinned against Bathsheba.
true.
He doesn't say I've sinned against Uriah.
Right,
He doesn't say I've sinned against Joab by getting Joab to do my dirty work. He doesn't say I've sinned against myself by degrading myself. He doesn't say I've sinned against my family by leading them into this period of dysfunction. I've sinned against the Lord. So when we sin, without discounting the very real hurt that we give to each other, where are we? Where is our sin lodged? Who are we sinning against?
God.
God.
mhm,
We're sinning against God, I think, this is Fritz theology here, because we're not being the people God created us to be.
Right.
Yeah.
mhm.
So at the end of the day, we are violating the image of God that is in ourselves by our sin. We're also creating a lot of hurt and chaos in a world we're supposed to be caring for, among people we're supposed to be caring for.
Right.
But ultimately, it comes back to we are breaking that very real covenant with God that we will be his people and he will be our God.
Mm.
What then should be our response to God's response to our sin?
We should repent.
We should repent.
Think before we do something.
Think before we do something. What else should we do?
Well, confess the sin to the Lord
confess, but
and ask
what,
for forgiveness, yeah.
but then what's next? What's the next piece?
Not go on sinning.
But beyond that,
Ask for the Lord's guidance not to do stuff like that.
yeah, but I'm pushing beyond that.
Can you go back and undo something that you messed up?
But that's
That's-
kind of. But look at, let's pick on, we'll go back to East Palestine for a moment, pick on Norfolk Southern. So Norfolk Southern somehow corporately sinned, we can point
Right,
fingers at that how we want. They have acknowledged that they crashed the train, it was hard to avoid acknowledging that.
Right.
What is now being expected of Norfolk Southern?
They're
To
gonna
make
pay
Clean up their mess.
Clean up the mess.
Make amends,
Make amends.
Make amends,
do what is right.
yes.
Those
Re-
people will never
try
get over it.
To restore to the best of our ability with God's help, what we have undone.
Okay,
And they're giving money to the families.
Right, they're, we
Making
can debate
restitution.
how hard they're really trying, but that's beyond the point. That's what's expected of them.
Right.
One of the things we'll see in the David story is he struggles with this last one. The reason that Absalom kills Amar, his brother,
mhm,
for raping Tamar, his sister, is because David ignores it.
Wow.
okay,
Mm.
but again, this is the woman's situation.
Right,
They
but,
were property
but-
and therefore,
you know, Amar is the crown prince, can do no wrong, the firstborn, the oldest, yada, yada, yada. And so David just says, oh, you're a good boy. You didn't really mean to rape your sister.
don't do it again.
Don't do
Don't
it
do
again.
Right. We're gonna end there. Next week, we're gonna dive into the Psalms. We're gonna take a break from the bloodshed. We're gonna take a break from the family drama. We're gonna dive into the Psalms. I've given you a head start in the handout. One of the things we're gonna talk about is that Scripture assigns Psalms to periods in David's life, points in David's life. So David did X, Y, and Z. This Psalm is linked to David doing X, Y, and Z. Psalm 51 is one of the top 10 Psalms. It is the Psalm of repentance, the Psalm of confession. I often use it in worship as a prayer of confession. We sing it on Ash Wednesday. And it is linked directly to David and Bathsheba.
Okay.
The tradition is that he wrote it after Nathan had left. As he was meditating on his sin. So I've given it to you. We may look at more next week. It is a beautiful, beautiful piece of poetry around sin and repentance. And next week, we're going to talk about that whole relationship between David and the Psalms and how they go hand in hand, that David is seen as the author of the Psalms, or some of them. So that's where we're at. Any final thoughts, questions?
I'm just looking at the chart of for the family chart. And after all this, he and Bathsheba had 3 more children,
Maybe, yes.
one named Nathan.
One named Nathan, maybe, yes. This is the discrepancy between the two accounts.
Okay,
But it is interesting in this whole dynamic that Bathsheba has more children with David than any of his other wives. Most of his wives only have one son. Now, there may have been daughters out the wazoo, we don't know, they didn't count,
they didn't come
unless they were raped.
unless they were raped.
But yes, Bathsheba's the only one who we have a list of
Okay.
multiple children. She has at least two, according to Samuel, with David. But according to Chronicles, she has a total of 5 with David. And that might suggest a standing within the harem that was different than the other wives. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
This was interesting.
It
Um,
was.
Thank you to our online folks.